welcome everyone. I hope you've all had an opportunity to look at the exhibits downstairs. They're really exciting. They're by our set of innovators from our programme Designing London's Recovery. And hopefully they gave you some good insight into the interesting and important work they're doing across 4 of London's recovery missions. So those missions are Good Work, High Streets for All, Green New Deal, and Building Stronger Communities. Hopefully as well, it's sparked your interest in open innovation challenges. If that's the case, then I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to this session where we'll be talking about and launching a whole new challenge run out of the Greater London Authority called Challenge London. Hopefully you could have worked that one out. So my name is Max Smith. I'm part of the team at the Greater London Authority that's tasked with rolling out Challenge London. And therefore it's my great pleasure to be able to guide you through the three wonderful speakers we have today. So Challenge London is a holistic open innovation programme, and this means that we get insights from a number of different places. So from policy teams at the GLA, from local London boroughs, but also from the wider community organisations and the people themselves. Excitingly, this session, we're going to hear from all 3 of those different perspectives. So we're going to hear from Theo Blackwell, the Mayor's Chief Digital Officer, Barry May, Assistant Director of Resident Experience and Digital at Barnet Council, and Christina Adana, Founder and Co-Chair at Bite Back 2030, a charity fighting to make sure every child has access to nutritious food. So Challenge London is a programme based on open innovation, and to explain a bit more about what that means, the process around it, and to launch the next phase of Challenge London, please welcome the Mayor's Digital Officer, Theo Blackwell.
To be here at the launch of Challenge London. It's something we've been working on for a while, and I'll just run through our experience with open innovation. First of all, in my notes it says, why did the Mayor appoint a Chief Digital Officer? Let me explain that first. I've been 5 years in the role as Chief Digital Officer, and the reason why it was created in London is London is, of course, represented by great bodies with a track record of serving Londoners, like Transport for London, which did the congestion charge and contactless payment, and lots of innovation that has made lives easier for Londoners, used data in a way that has created loads of applications so people can move around the capital easily, has used technology to reduce queues. We have huge institutions, global institutions in our capital, and we've got 32 boroughs. So below the Greater London Authority, we have 32 boroughs, each the size of a sort of middle-sized North American or European city. So if you look at the London Borough of Barnet, which Barry represents today, that will have a population of about 330,000 people, 400,000 people. So, that is bigger than Pittsburgh. Our challenge in London is how, when we look beyond transport, because Transport for London looks across all of London, and we looked at other areas where innovation can be applied, how do we get the benefits of scale in our city? Because sometimes those administrative barriers stand in the way of those best ideas taking root and flourishing and serving Londoners wherever you live. So, as Chief Digital Officer, my role was to develop an approach which emphasised strategic digital coordination, how we approach smart cities, how we approach the linking up of data, so key to innovation, how we develop a common approach to design thinking, and how do we create new institutions that can drive this forward, so not relying on those institutions of the past. And glad that Jay, put your hand up, Jay, he's representing the London Office of Technology and Innovation today, which is a team of people we've put together in the London Council's organisation that is dedicated to design thinking and data, working specifically with those London boroughs. So there's new teams and new institutions and new methods. Open innovation, of those, open innovation is a very, very important part. And why is it important? Why haven't we done this before? Well, it was a specific cause championed by Sadiq when he became mayor. He launched the Mayor's Civic Innovation Challenge in 2018. And he believes that you need an open call approach so that you can help teams go beyond their traditional silos. Quite often in organisations, whether they're public or private sector, you can get locked in professions, you can get locked in those silos and not think about what's happening around you or outside of those silo walls. And of course, in London over the last 2 decades, we've seen a massive explosion of the tech sector. We don't really talk about tech city anymore because there's so many clusters and specialisms happening right across the city. There's so much more engagement with universities, and we've got great institutions we're very lucky to have here, like the Design Council, that enable us to lift our sights if we only move to lift our eyes, as it were. So the Mayor started the Civic Innovation Challenge in 2018. That looked at how we can solve problems identified by domain experts in the transport sector. So how can we look at more efficient freight movement across the city is something a team of people at Transport for London have been looking at for a while, not least because it causes pollution, but it also is a barrier for people taking up cycling. So if we can use data and design to move freight, heavy goods vehicles around the city, we can make a more pleasant and safer environment for cyclists. The police were charged with countering violent extremism. They did not have the internal capability to meet that challenge. So how do we combat hate crime online? So they turned to our Open Innovation Challenge, which resulted in the tie-up with a university spin-off to create an app that allowed people to raise concerns about extremist online content. And we also had a success in areas like 3D modelling for the city and how to make London more accessible for electric vehicles. Connected Curb was a really good example of that in Southwark, where we linked them together with Southwark Council to use an actual curbside so they could put in electric vehicle charging equipment, and then we tied them up with National Grid because obviously energy supply is so important to electric vehicle charging. And through these open calls, we're bringing together partners that we never brought together in order to rapidly prototype things and test out if they work. And also, I think, even if things don't work, the process of civil servants looking outside of their silo, engaging with innovators, teaches people the art of the possible. And so I think there's sort of 2 real benefits from this. It's the thing itself that you create, and it's the process that you learn and become a better public servant. We've continued our work with something called the Mayor's Resilience Fund, which addressed, amongst others, improving air quality, enabling the gig economy, and supporting the hundreds of public markets across London. And we also have something that developed over the pandemic to support London's recovery called Designing London's Recovery, which was looking at the areas that Londoners themselves had identified to us that were important in building the city back better, such as working on climate change initiatives, working directly on jobs and youth and supporting young people as well. So, introducing Challenge London is what I'm here to do today. This year's grand open innovation has this title, Challenge London, and is focused on what's really emerged to us all as a major pressing issue for Londoners, which is on poverty prevention, as we are in the midst, as we know, of a cost of living crisis. So what we want to do is specifically identify and support those who are at serious risk of falling into poverty but are currently falling through the gaps. And there could never be a better time to do this and bring in London's talent and London's minds to help those who need it most. Our ambitions are to create a new cohort of ideas and innovators who can spin up their ideas, prototype their interventions with our partner borough of Barnet, and work with us through our programme of support and grow in scale across the entire city. So by doing this, you'll be working on the ground with very skilled and dedicated public servants in a London borough the size of Pittsburgh. and having come from a local authority myself, the London Borough of Camden, where I was for 15 years, part of with Barry, actually, I can say that the hidden story of London's public services are those who work at a local authority level, who work in housing and social care and digital. So they really, really have hands-on experience of how to solve problems that are presented to them on a daily basis. And by involving local authorities in this challenge, we also enable them to, in a sense, have that space to think outside the box rather than just deal with the day-to-day challenges that often swamp us. So the launch of Challenge London is an open call to you, innovators, and what we're looking for. So one, we're looking for disruptive thinkers, and we need new angles and approaches to the problems that are presented to us. We need agile and ambitious innovators. And we also need, three, people who can create solutions in places, so place-based solutions, which can scale to help all of Londoners. And you won't be doing this alone, you'll be doing this in concert with our team. So I think the opportunity is there to do something of real benefit for Londoners, and I'm so excited to be here at the launch. Thank you, and over to Max.
Gonna follow Theo's lead of standing here. It seems much easier. Thank you, Theo. Thank you for that. And yes, just let me just reiterate that it would be really great if you can all visit the london.gov.uk website and specifically the Challenge London page and read all about this particular challenge and share it with anyone who you might think would be interested. So, over to our second speaker now. Our second speaker is Barry May, Assistant Director of Resident Experience and Digital at Barnet Council. Now that's quite a unique role, the Resident Experience and Digital, but this has given him a great oversight of the huge programme of work that Barnet have done over the last 2 years, trying to understand and support their residents who are at risk of falling into poverty. And from this oversight, he's been able to help improve the interactions residents have had with their council through a clearer and more harmonised use of data. So to explain much better than I can and give context around Barnet, please welcome Barry May.
Oh, right, okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be here. They're exciting. I think Theo made me feel very old there, thinking that we started working together 15 years ago. And I certainly didn't know Barnet was the size of Pittsburgh, so I'm learning as we go in real time. So as I was introduced, my name is Barry May, so I am the Assistant Director of Resident Experience and Digital at the London Borough of Barnet. And what that means in effect is that I have responsibility for kind of those resident-facing services across the council, our IT function, but also, more importantly for this programme, our sort of digital transformation, both internally and externally, and how we look at different solutions working with partners to bring some innovation into a local authority, which sometimes can be kind of quite stuck in traditional process, legacy systems, and sometimes the innovation and creativity that is here, obviously, in this building, doesn't necessarily come into a local authority environment. So it's a really exciting opportunity for the London Borough of Barnet. And if we flick on to the next slide, I'll talk about Barnet as a bit of a place, what it means. I think I've missed this bit, actually, of just where Barnet was in London. So there was a bit of a map of the London boroughs. So just in case you don't know, London Borough of Barnet is sort of north-central, so just above Camden, in between Enfield and Brent. So very much in the centre of London, but it also cuts across quite a diverse area. So it is the biggest by population London borough. And I don't know what this will make us in 10, 20 years' time. We're expected to increase that population to 450,000. And that is because some of the huge regeneration that's going on in the borough. So there's kind of a whole new area around Brent Cross, new train station, around Colindale, some really significant regeneration that will add quite a significant population to the borough in quite a short period of time. And obviously that brings challenges for the public sector and our local authority. Some of the sort of figures on here just give you a context of Barnet as a place. I think some of the things I was just going to pull out is, it's a really diverse borough. I'm always, the sort of stat that blows my mind is the one about 190 spoken languages. 49% of our residents are non-white, and that diversity and inclusion is really at the heart of what we kind of do. And certainly in terms of this programme, how we address some of the disproportionality in impact for financial vulnerability is really important to us and a really important focus. We've got the numbers of residents. The other thing just to note, I am a Barnet resident as well, so I am an immediate feedback loop on myself when I'm frustrated with the council. How I then go and fix it the next day is the challenge. But the reason I moved to Barnet was because of the schools. It's got some of the best schools in the country, and we've got a really growing young person's population, and some of the Ofsted ratings are really significant, and that's actually one of the reasons why it draws a lot of people, parents that got young children there. So I wasn't really going to pick anything else. So the only other thing I was going to pick on there actually was just about the charity and the voluntary sector and our partners and organisation, and Barnet very much works with those organisations and tries to build that into our model. So we are looking across that sector, and how we fund that sector is certainly kind of an important part of our response to the cost of living crisis at the moment. And we're very conscious that, as with local authorities and the rest of the public sector, that those organisations are really under pressure from a demand perspective. So although Citizens Advice Bureau and other agencies within Barnet will work with, we don't want to just be signposting residents to those organisations for support around financial vulnerability. The other thing I was just going to mention in terms of the sort of Barnet context is we have just changed politically our administration, and that's the first time forever. So Barnet's always been, I think there was one coalition back sometime, the dates I can't remember, but it has always kind of been a Conservative borough. So we've changed to a Labour administration in May in the London elections, and that has really changed the focus on our priorities in the borough, and kind of real focus on tackling some of the inequalities that exist kind of across the borough and across our population. And also brought with it quite a big transformation programme for us around, and actually this is a really good example of perhaps a change in terms of where our kind of political leaders want us to get to, that co-production with our residents, making sure they are co-designing products, services with us, and we're looking across London, other London authorities, the private sector and other organisations to devise new ways of tackling some quite significant challenges we have. And that's really significant, I think, as we go along. We've got support. We've just had a kind of resident experience and digital strategy signed off over 3-4 years with the investment behind it, and how we bring in innovation and new ways of working is a really kind of key pillar to that, and how we genuinely work with our residents and co-design those products is also a really key focus for them, and by definition for us as kind of staff delivering those priorities. So that focus on people, place and our planet are kind of the emerging 3 priorities. If we flick on to the next slide. I think this slide, I just want to touch on this, just from a kind of place perspective, really. So Barnet is considered perhaps as in some cases, a fairly affluent borough. As I say, it stretches kind of onto the borders of London. But our pockets of deprivation are really focused in particular areas. So actually the programme that we've been working on around financial vulnerability, it does allow from a place-based perspective us to focus how we might shape resources and services in a different way to tackle what you can see is very much on the west as the borough, and some pockets over on kind of the east, but they're really focused in particular areas. And the other kind of measure around some of the deprivation, some of the different impacts, is kind of child poverty. And in Barnet, 12% of children are considered living in relative poverty and 10% in absolute poverty. And that is lower than the London and national average, but it is rising through our data. So that's why for us, it's not only a here and now cost of living crisis, it's a kind of future. How do we make sure those families that are supporting, that we're supporting, that doesn't increase further? If we just flip on to the next slide. So this is kind of really just some of the why, really. We've been kind of on this journey for about 18 months, looking at kind of financial vulnerability and how we can support our residents in a different way. And we've done that very much through a prevention lens. So looking at some of the statistics in Barnet around those people that are impacted by financial difficulties, poverty, and then more immediately the cost of living crisis and support that we need to give. So I'm not going to kind of read those stats out, but I think that just contextualises where we look at some of those from a local authority perspective. That kind of being in debt, that financial hardship has impact on our other services, and certainly our health partnerships as well, through our adults and housing and all the costs that sort of elevates within the council is a really important focus for us, because how can we, across the system, look at cost in that way. And there's some stats on there that kind of drive us in terms of the why we're doing this and what drives the case of change. If you just flick on to the next slide, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our journey to date. So as I say, we started about 18 months ago. I think, when I summarise what the challenges are within a local authority context, the silo, the data, technology, people and process silo, from our residents' perspective, is consistently a theme across the piece. And actually our new resident experience strategy looks to address that, and the kind of cost of living and financial vulnerability is a really good example of where we may have 6 or 7 teams, multiple staff working in different areas of the council, not really talking to each other, using different technology, using different data sources. So just to bring the data and insight together that informs what we want to design and what we want to deliver has taken us that long. We have got investment now to start thinking about how we do that in a more automated and systematic way. But the matching and finding where kind of the big risk areas in terms of resident is takes us time and effort. And we've reviewed that from a debt perspective. So we looked at debt within the systems that we have across council tax, housing, rent arrears, and adults, so care provision. And that was able to identify some scope of where we might focus our attention, because we have got limited resources. And what I think you can see by this slide is that one of the things that kind of coming across quite apparent is different approaches. So the 33% that talk about on the slide that were genuinely in financial hardship had multiple debts across multiple systems, were interacting with multiple services and were genuinely in financial hardship, had no way of getting themselves out of the position they were in, that's where we want our focus to be. We've got different mechanisms and levers for the 68%, I think I've got my percentages wrong there, but the 68% that actually were identified of actually the reason they weren't settling their debt with the council wasn't because of financial vulnerability, it was just in terms of either didn't want to or couldn't pay, and that access to service. So that allows us to focus a little bit and target our resources. And some of the stats there around multiple debt and some coming back to the previous slide about some of the vulnerability and how those individuals, their need is increasing and getting more complex through other services, through adults and housing, and the demand and pressure that's putting on them. And that's a really kind of important focus for us as we develop and move forward. So the other thing just to touch on briefly was there was some of the qualitative data, but some of the qualitative data, with residents, we did some in-depth interviews with our residents to kind of understand a bit more about kind of their problems, their challenges, their barriers, and why they were in the position they were in. And I've just picked out some of the reasons around kind of the top areas that were coming out. And we kind of have validated this across other data sets, but a kind of sudden income shock, loss of employment, a kind of hit was kind of the top reason. Illness linked to some of the health issues that on the previous slide. And cost of living, obviously, for the time we did this, cost of living was kind of the topic of conversation, but that just lack of affordability between their income and kind of the world that they were in, and then how they prioritised their debt and what they considered they prioritised. And the challenges that they faced from a council perspective and the broader public sector was really stark, actually. And some of the on first read, it was quite shocking. Some of the terms that our residents were using around kind of, threatening, anxious, really scared of contacting the public authority, either the local authority or indeed other partners, because they were worried that by surfacing themselves, that might have an impact on their benefit, on their kind of other support that we could give. And that was a consistent theme that came across. And that was quite a worry, really. But I think when we spoke to staff who actually traditionally had been focused on debt collection, and their roles have changed. So we're asking our staff to think very differently as well about how we support our residents in a different way. And kind of not be so threatening would be one aim. But the other things that were kind of surfaced as barriers were lack of access, complexity. I don't know if any of you may know, dealing with the public sector yourself, the amount of kind of letters you might get, the information you get, it's all complex. I work for a local authority and I can't support my mother-in-law who English isn't her first language. I have to take that into some expert in the council to kind of work through and navigate the systems and processes that are put in front of people. And that complexity and simplicity has to be part of that kind of solution. And I think, coming to Theo's point, one of our key focuses is those people we're kind of missing, the ones we don't know, predicting kind of where some of that plunging into poverty might be, so we can pick it up earlier, we can intervene earlier, because we have got the mechanisms and levers to support those people, but we're just not always surfacing that to as well as we could, and certainly not in a coordinated way. So there was a lot in there around kind of that kind of interaction, which kind of falls into where I got kind of get involved in these kind of projects. So I just want to finish on so I just talked about just some of that in the summary. So I just wanted to finish really about our hopes for this innovation. So, part of it is building on what we've already done, but we are conscious that that's quite reactive, and we need to switch that to be kind of more proactive and preventative. I think the thing is, from a kind of somebody that's worked in the public sector for 10, 15 years, as Theo has now reminded me, in local authorities anyway, we have done this before. We've tried to do this before. We know there's data silos and technology silos and legacy systems, and we never seem to quite solve it for the longer term. How are our interventions having that tangible impact? And what can we do differently, and how can we look at the problem differently? How can we look at people like yourselves in the room to bring a completely different perspective into an environment which is quite entrenched sometimes in some of the processes and ways of working. And that's something I think that's quite really exciting, and hopefully with some of the insight and data that we have as a local authority and expertise and skill sets that we have, we can really complement and work together on that. I think for us, co-design and co-production, although it's in my heart, I was at Camden for a long time, it is something new to Barnet as an authority. It's really supported by a new administration, but how do we do that in practice? You know, how do we do that, make a tangible difference to our residents? So we properly, when we say co-design, we're not just kind of listening to them and then doing something different. We're actually kind of involving them in that process. We're taking that kind of service design approach to the way we design that service and that perspective. And the other thing I just think as well for me is around kind of, we talked about the disproportionality and how that affects different groups, that EDI lens across all of this, and where we can support those residents where the impact's going to be greater. You know, because a lot of the public sector, and certainly from a local authority, when we talk to staff, all this to them is, you're just asking us to do more, you're just asking us to run faster, we haven't got the resources, the demand is huge. You know, and what tends to happen is it just gets pushed. So a lot of our systems are set up to try and deflect that demand, but we're not then tracking the impact of that, or that resident or person could get lost in another system. And that's the bit that we're really trying to change. And the different approach should hopefully, looking holistically across the piece, help us to do that. So I think I've probably had my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barry. That was a great show of why it's so important to be doing a challenge on poverty from a Boroughs perspective. Hopefully, not hopefully, definitely, the next person's going to give us a great insight into why it's important from more of a community organisation angle. So the third person we're going to hear from is Christina Adana. She is founder and co-chair of Bite Back 2030, a charity focused on driving a movement to give every young person in the UK access to healthy, nutritious food, no matter where they live. As part of this work, she has fronted campaigns around free school meals and stopping junk food. And in 2020, Christina was named one of the top 100 women of 2020 by the BBC, followed by in 2021 winning the Diana Legacy Award for her efforts with Bite Back in fighting for a fairer food system. So, to talk about her work and the scale of the need for change, please welcome Christina Adana.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina Adana, and one second, sorry. I am, as Max said, I was co-chair of Bite Back 2030, now I'm working there as campaigner in residence. Bite Back 2030 is a youth-led movement fighting the injustices of the food industry, and we do that on multiple fronts. So how did I get into food? It's not really a sexy topic. Talking about obesity and diet-related disease isn't something that young people tend to be interested in. So I grew up working class with an immigrant background. I went to school, I was on free school meals, and this life was the same experience no matter, all my friends had the same experience, so I didn't really feel different. And then I moved schools, and it was a wealthier school in Westminster, and then I started seeing the difference between me and my peers. But still, I was not really aware at how my socioeconomic background impacted food and the food I was eating. Until I joined Bite Back, just by chance, my manager who I was doing work experience with at the time had told me about Bite Back, which is co-founded by Jamie Oliver, and I was interested in climate at the time. So my main thing was, food is one of the biggest polluters. How the hell are we not talking about it in the climate space? So that was how I kind of entered the food conversation. When I applied to Bite Back and got in, I realised there's way more that food is that the food system is responsible for, and within the first couple days at Bite Back during the training sessions, I found out that because of where I live, I'm twice as likely to develop obesity. I'm likely to die around 10 years earlier than my more affluent peers because I'm poorer. And 1 in 3 children by the time that they reach 11 years old are at risk of diet-related disease. How the hell does that happen in London? That didn't make any sense to me. So I got really, really angry. So did 14 other young people. We started our youth board and I was co-chair of it. And so that is essentially Bite Back. We fight for healthier streets, screens, and schools. And the key point that I'm trying to convey is, at the moment, a child's quality of life is directly determined by their socio-economic background. That's not good enough. And it's been like that for the 4 years I've been campaigning around this. So in 2019, I co-hosted the Mayor's Fund for London first Children's Food Summit, and then 400,000 children in London experienced food insecurity. And it's unfortunate to say, I'm pretty sure I could guarantee you the number's higher now, much higher, due to the cost of living crisis, due to COVID, and the fact that there hasn't been any action from the people in power to solve the issue. I usually don't like disclosing my age because it makes people undermine me, but I started the Free School Meal campaign when I was 16. I'm now 19. And when I was 16 and I launched the Free School Meal petition, it was during lockdown. It was the 8th week, and I had discovered that the government was preventing provisions of free school meals over the May half term. It was a global pandemic. There was no money coming in for families. You know, everyone was breaking their budgets, and children didn't know when their next plate was coming. So as someone that was a recipient of free school meals, I felt like I had to do something. I launched a petition, and it blew up instantly. So many young people came forward saying, I was on free school meals, or I'm on free school meals, this is important to me. Parents were messaging me. There was, the country kind of went crazy on the issue, and it was the first time, food and food insecurity was spoken about in a destigmatized sense. So we achieved the government U-turn for the May half term, but then we realized, okay, so we're going to have to campaign about this every single holiday just to ensure that young people have the right to eat during holiday. Like, it doesn't make sense. So then it launched the longer-term campaign to end child food poverty. And then that's when Marcus Rashford caught on and spearheaded his summer campaign. And even that wasn't enough to get the government to guarantee a long-term solution to end child food poverty in the UK. So that's currently where we're at. On top of that now, I've relaunched the Free School Meal campaign at 19 years old to extend eligibility for the 800,000 children that don't have access to it and are living in poverty because their families have been pushed below the poverty line due to the cost of living crisis. And my main question is, and I hope you can hear the passion in my voice, I'm angry because why is it so hard to protect young people and give them the fundamental right to food, healthy, nutritious food? And one of the biggest issues that I've found in my campaigning is that party politics always gets in the way. So the Free School Meal campaign became a very deeply decisive and political issue. The controversy is what is currently letting 800,000 children go hungry. Liz Truss, due to her ideological beliefs, won't intervene. She literally won't, extend those provisions for those young people. And so what we at Bite Back are working on is how do we reframe the issue so that we get policymakers to understand that this is something that helps everyone. And I was just discussing with someone earlier, I forgot the name. This includes making the economic argument because, feeding children isn't an excuse enough. It's not a reason enough. So you have to look at it from that perspective. If we feed young people nutritious food, that means the NHS has less of a strain years later when our generation shows up on their doorstep with diet-related disease. It means that we are economically active for a longer period of time. And so a lot of what we do is reframing issues to make everyone a winner. We do the same with companies. So we have a food accelerator system where we work with 8 companies, Deliveroo, KFC, Danone, to name a few, and we look at what they could do to improve their child health strategy. Some of them haven't been great and think that they're doing perfectly fine already. Others, like Tesco, are doing amazing things. So Tesco have committed to a better basket scheme. They work in local communities to ensure that their food banks are well funded and well provisioned. They've banned the promotion of junk food advertising and multi-buy promos, which is a huge big food argument that essentially they've made the excuse that because of the cost of living crisis, multi-buy promos that promote junk food actually help deprived communities save more on their weekly shop when actually it costs them 20% more. So we're really up against a lot, right? But where we really believe that working with all the stakeholders involved means that we can work collectively to move towards a better future where children's health is protected. So I've already started talking about how we move forward. One of the biggest things for me and for Bite Back is reframing from going to an individual blame scenario to a collective responsibility. It's a systemic issue, kind of accountability. So we don't use the word choice when we're talking about young people. We don't believe young people have a choice in the food that they eat. When I was in school, I would be on my phone in the morning, check my Twitter, Instagram, whatever. I'd have advertisements for McDonald's, all these junk food companies. You're excused. And then you have, you go to school. I live in South London. I live in a food desert. So you see all these junk food ads on my streets. And then I walk across the bridge to Westminster, and then I've got Leon and a Pret and all these food options that aren't accessible to me, out of my price range, aren't even marketed to me. Then I go to school. I have terrible canteen food that I probably won't eat. I'll come back out. And again, same thing happens. You're on your phone. We're exposed to 16 billion ads in the past 4 years as young people, which equates to 500 ads per second, which is insane. And then you've got your street advertisement, which is particularly in deprived areas. And then you've got, as I said, the lack of access to nutritious food. And yet people want to blame us for the food that we eat. No, we don't have a choice in it. We need to change our food environments, our physical environments, to ensure that we have the option to eat healthily, because at the moment we don't. So that's one part of moving forward, reframing the discussion and stop blaming individuals for our health. The second way is when we talk about the future, we're talking about today's youth and who is going to inherit the responsibilities of tomorrow. So we must involve young people in today's conversations, in the decision-making, and one thing that I think Bite Back has done pretty well is connecting young people, particularly young people in deprived areas, to people in positions of power. I've had the incredible opportunity to talk to health secretaries, the CEOs of huge companies and supermarket chains, and we've made change. It really, really makes a difference when you have young people that have lived experience illustrate what the issue is on the ground to these people that will probably never experience what it's like. So I really, really beg of you, please involve young people in your decision-making, in your creative solutions, in your brainstorming. It really makes all the difference. And another way I can exemplify this is with my petition that I started in 2019. That was the first time in over 110 years that young people were included in the discussion on free school meals since it was first made mandatory in 1906. So that shows the amount of change we've made since then, even though it's still not adequate, shows that young people, particularly in issues that concern us, can really make all the difference. So yeah, instead of telling our stories for us, let us tell them ourselves. And please don't think that it isn't possible. It really is. Bite Back is a great example of that, and we have our local youth board in London if you want to engage with them. And we believe that everyone has a role to play. So companies have to work with their shareholders of the future, government have to listen to the next generation of voices, community leaders have to hold down this space to ensure that young people can dream of a better world without poverty. And yeah, despite the bleak times that we're living in, please remain hopeful, and change is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I really hope that Christina, Barry, and Theo have all inspired you to see the need to get involved and to get involved in Challenge London. And with that in mind, I have two requests before I let you go. One, can you please access london.gov.uk, find Challenge London, and either get involved yourself or share it with someone who you think would really like to get involved and apply. Secondly, there's a QR code outside. If you're interested in hearing more about innovation from the GLA, please sign up to our newsletter, and you can hear more about what we do. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for coming. Now, outside, we have a couple of drinks for everyone and a chance to meet and talk to each other. Thank you.